Welcome to Channel 17, the Town of Colonie Government Channel.
It goes all my life's a circle, sunrise and sundown. The moon rolls through the nighttime till the daybreak comes around. And all my life's a circle, I can't tell you why. Seasons spinning round again, the years keep rolling by.
Welcome. This is Story by Story. I'm Joe Doolittle.
And I'm Kate Dudding.
And Story by Story shares the art of storytelling and looks at the world and shares human experience, which is a nice thing to do. And you know, I was thinking about this word experience.
You were.
I was. I don't think very often, as you know.
No,
But
don't dump on yourself.
its root is in the same term of the Greek term for spire, which is to breathe.
Oh.
So experience is really sharing the breath of each other, which I think is really kind of a good reference for storytelling. Don't you think?
Yeah.
Don't you think? And what we're going to do in the course of this, what are we going to do in the course of this hour?
What we always do, Joe, we chit-chat, we introduce our guest tells a story, we go, ooh.
We reflect with the guest on the story.
Right.
Because storytelling, you know, everybody does a little storytelling.
Yeah. And then we do upcoming events, and then we repeat the guest story and the reflection, and then we tie it up and say, hope you come back next time.
Right, and we hope you enjoy storytelling, and we hope that this hour, if you're new to the idea of professional or semi-professional storytellers, that maybe your interest is piqued a bit to come to a performance, one of the meetings of our guild, Story Circle of the Capital District, and maybe think about, you know, using story and storytelling in your work or vocation. And actually, we hope your work is your vocation, because that's kind of another connection. What's the most fun you've been having in storytelling?
Well, in April, there was the 10th Annual Riverway Festival, and as usual, there were 3 stellar tellers.
Stellar tellers!
Yes.
Oh, fun.
Michael Parent from Maine, David Novak from North Carolina, and Valerie Tutson from Rhode Island.
Oh, wow. So they came, these big-time tellers came to Albany?
Yeah.
To tell stories right here in our backyard?
Yes, right here in this very building. Colonie Town Library had Laugh-In Night, and the 3 of them did a family version and then an adult version. Not X-rated, you know, just you know.
Spicy.
Well, or you've got to been around long enough to appreciate. You've had to have breathed long enough.
You have to
enough experiences to.
You're going to use that, aren't you?
Well, isn't that the theme?
Yes, it is. It is.
Yeah. Okay.
And so this Riverway Festival goes on for more than just one day.
Oh yes, it was 6 days.
6 days.
Well, Joe, we told together on Friday in Voorheesville.
Did we do that?
Yes, we did.
That was part of
me.
you and I.
Yeah.
We were great, by the way. If you missed us, just invite us to come to your house and tell stories sometime.
Yes.
Well, that's, you know, actually that was the most fun I had telling stories was part of Riverway, because it's always a great time of year because it's not snowing, and some great tellers come to the area, and we even hear some new tellers, because, you know, some of the folks we've had on the show were local tellers during that week, and Children at the Well. Didn't some of the kids tell again? Didn't we have some young storytellers?
Yes. Aditya was one of the showcase tellers, and then some other young people, from Maple Hill School in Castleton. They told Wednesday night at the Castleton Public Library.
Great.
Mary Murphy was their storytelling teacher and had prepared them to tell as part of Riverway.
And just so we don't miss the facts of the festival, the Storytelling Festival, like much of storytelling, runs the gamut from very young listeners to very old listeners and people in between. And when we talked about encouraging various members of those communities as both tellers and listeners, it's because it's applicable. And some of the most fun we have I think, is with some of the kids who are coming out, if you were, as storytellers. And I think some of the times that I enjoy the best is doing some things for some of the senior citizen centers, because it's really fun. It's really fun.
And of course, we should mention that the parent organization of Riverway Storytelling Festival is Upper Hudson Library System, and the producer is Mary Fellows.
Right. And that's because a lot of stories come from books.
Well, yes.
Yes. Just in case you missed that, I mean, out there.
I think the joke goes, what building has in your town has the most stories?
Got it. Got it. Is that from Boys Life too?
No. That was one of the ads in Riverway's program.
Okay.
Oh, the answer is the library,
Yes.
of course.
Okay. Well, we've talked a lot about storytelling, and we really are fans, you and I.
Oh, yes.
But you know, what we try to do with the show and our time together is to kind of introduce you to a real live storyteller and live stories, because there's no better way to share an experience, if you will, than to share the airspace with a storyteller. And we've invited one of my favorite people here today, Peggy Cimino, who by profession is a school teacher. And I met her first at a guild meeting many years ago. I hate to think about that, but that was so. And she's been telling stories a long time. So welcome, Peggy, to Story by Story. And we're happy you're here to share your storytelling experiences.
I'm delighted to be here, just delighted. And I have been telling stories a long time, it seems.
How long?
Well, I first became interested in storytelling when I was teaching 3rd grade, and I took the children to their library class, and instead of leaving them for their class, I stayed in the library because I was gathering books for a solar system project or something. And the librarian, at the end of the period, sat down and told them an Anansi story.
An Anansi story, a trickster story.
And I was enthralled with their attention. And at that particular time in the 3rd grade, we were doing, for our social studies / geography curriculum, areas of the world like the Arctic area, the desert area, the rainforest. So I started gathering stories from those different areas and incorporated them in the curriculum and found them to be so exciting that the children started asking, could they tell stories? And they would read a story, and then on Friday mornings we had storytelling time, and they would ask, can I tell a story? And it was a pleasure to watch them, because even though they forgot parts of it or they had to go back around again, they were so proud of themselves. And so that's how I started telling stories.
So let me get this straight. Instead of going to have coffee when your kids were in the library as a teacher, you were doing research on a current project and stumbled into this story.
I sort of
She
stumbled.
fell down the storytelling hole.
She overheard. She was on one side of the card catalog and heard the story on the other.
And crept closer and
We're gonna make
closer.
it, yes.
And we did have a card catalog then,
Right.
which we don't have anymore.
Not for you in the younger generation. We'll explain what that is later. Now, I'm just curious. When you began to find the stories and either read or tell them to your students, when did the revolution come in your class when the students said, I want to tell a story? How did that happen? That's a good bit of little, you as a teacher giving it away, you know?
Well, some of it comes from personal stories that the children want to tell. You know that old show and tell? And they will tell you something that happened. And then we were doing a lot of writing at the time and making our own books. And so the children would say, can I tell this story? And then they might even tell about their birthday party or an aunt that came to visit or a trip that they had gone on. And it just sort of snowballed. Everyone wanted to get in on it. You know, it was a great time to them. So storytelling became an integral part of our curriculum.
Did you find sometimes there are students who don't shine with the regular curriculum, but when storytelling comes around,
That's right.
They are just brilliant at it.
It just brings out. It's similar to what puppets will do for for young children who are very shy, but put a puppet in their hand and they're off to the races. Storytelling does the same thing. The one problem I had is that children wanted to tell sometimes a movie. And then it was like, and then, so I had to wean them away from telling TV shows or movies, and get them into the literature.
So in a way, you had to take them back into imagination from something that was more rote.
That's right.
Interesting. Now, as all this was happening, you're teaching third grade. Now, when did you actually kind of become a storyteller as opposed to, when did you realize that was one of your attributes? Because, on one hand, you still describe yourself as a teacher, but when did the storyteller come out in you, so to speak, professionally?
That's an interesting question. The first time I went to the Story Circle meeting, it was held in Scotia at their library, and I saw just a little bit in the newspaper that announced the meeting, and I thought, now that sounds like something I would like to do. So I started there. I don't know whether, we're all storytellers,
right.
And so it just was, I saw people who were very skilled telling stories, and I marveled at it, and so that kind of gave me the incentive to work a little harder on it, so that's how I think I started evolving into. And then when I retired from teaching, I was talking to Becky Holder, and a storyteller.
And one of the founders of Story Circle in the Capital Region.
And she said, now Peggy, make a brochure and send it out to schools and organizations. So that's what I did. But my next problem was, what do I charge?
You could get paid for this?
Yeah. What do I charge somebody to listen to me? And I don't have a reputation that I can, go out with. And so Lois Hodge, another founder, was very helpful. So was Tom Weekly in giving me some input into it. So I ended up making a brochure. And I still have quite a few of them.
Yeah, we all do. Okay. I look a lot younger in the brochure I have right now.
I had very long hair.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's really wonderful. That's a good story in and of itself.
We've been talking about stories for 13 minutes or so, and could we actually hear a story?
I would love to tell a story.
Good for you.
This is a story that is my version of a story that Don Ketting tells, and he's very generous with saying you can pass these stories on. His story title is One Man's Trouble. But I reworked this story and I just call it Trouble. There was once a farmer who was so poor that even though he worked from sunrise to sunset, he couldn't make ends meet. In the spring, he would plant his crops, and one year there would be a flood. The following year, there'd be a drought. His animals grew thin for lack of food. His hens stopped laying eggs. His cow stopped producing milk. The man was beside himself. One day he sat down on a stump in the barnyard, put his head in his hands, and as he sat there, he noticed something moving up around the barn. It stood upright like a man, but it seemed to be covered with hair or fur. So as he crept closer, he noticed it had black, beady eyes and yellow teeth. And he called out, "What are you? Who are you?" And the creature replied, "I am Trouble. I am the reason for all your misfortune. I like hanging around your farm, causing trouble, trouble, trouble. The man was so angry. He grabbed Trouble. He tied him up with a rope. Then he dug a deep hole over by the pasture fence, and he set Trouble right down in that deep hole. And so he couldn't escape. He got big boulders and piled them right on top of the opening. And you know, the next day, the man's fortune changed. His crops started growing. His trees were laden with fruit. His animals gave birth to their young. The hens started laying eggs. The cows produced more milk than they ever had before. Merchants came from the town to buy his milk and eggs, and people from all over the countryside heard that his produce was the freshest, the best to be found. And little by little, the man got wealthier and wealthier and wealthier. Now, the farmer had a neighbor who had always been a very wealthy man. In fact, he looked down on that farmer thinking his misfortune is due to either laziness or lack of ability on how to run a farm. But when he saw the farmer prospering, he wasn't very pleased. He liked being the wealthiest man in the countryside. So he went down to pay a visit with the farmer. And as they talked, the farmer told him all about Trouble and how he had buried him down in that hole. That night, under the cover of darkness, the neighbor crept into the farmer's yard. He carefully removed those boulders and pulled Trouble right out of that hole, cutting the ropes. Trouble said, "Oh, thank you for rescuing me." And the wealthy neighbor said, "Now you are free to roam around this farm once more." But Trouble said, "Oh no, I don't want to stay around this farm. The farmer was mean to me. He put me down in a hole. But you have been so kind. You freed me. I'd like to hang around you." And so it was. Trouble went home with that wealthy man. Now, that doesn't have to be the end of the story. So I'm giving the story to you. You can continue it, or you can end it as you see fit. And that's the story of Trouble.
Wow.
Well, thank you.
That was, for Trouble, that was a fun story. Now, I didn't know where that was going to end, and it doesn't.
It doesn't. I've given it to you. You can
Well,
carry on with it.
So when you tell that story to an audience, do they ever complain about you not finishing the story?
No.
They don't?
I haven't. Maybe they think it, but they haven't
They
said
haven't
it.
expressed it.
Well, maybe they're going to take it home and
mull
in
it
the
over.
quiet of their home, think about
It's,
what could have happened with Trouble when he went home with that, or what could have happened to the wealthy man when
Right.
Trouble,
Trouble went
set
home,
up
yeah.
residence in
But-
his property.
and was Trouble careful not to be caught, so he'd wind up in a hole again at the wealthy man's house?
Very good.
Very good.
See,
How, what did Trouble learn from being put in a hole? There you go. That's the other.
Never trouble, less trouble
Never
troubles
trouble.
you.
That's true. That's true.
Right.
And actually, this particular Trouble wasn't a vindictive Trouble. He didn't want to get even at the other guy.
No, but you relished so much his opening speech of
Yeah.
I'm causing all your trouble. That
I'm going to go look for that woolly person in my backyard because we've had to get a new roof and a few other things. I'm just beginning to think.
well,
now that
every
my-
20 years, the house needs a whole bunch of
Yeah.
stuff.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
think Trouble pays a visit to many of us.
Yes.
many times. And,
Yes, let's see, that's.
as long as he doesn't hang around, you
Right.
see, that's,
But he'll be back.
he'll be back.
He'll be
Yeah.
back. He,
One form or
he
another.
revisits her. And I'm glad it was a man in a way, because, I wouldn't want a woman to cause all that kind of trouble.
Okay. And Dan Kenning came to Riverway 4, 5, 6 years
4 or 5
ago.
years ago.
did he?
Yes.
Yes, yes.
Yes. Very delightful stories.
Yeah, what I liked, one of the things that he taught at his workshop was your story, as you demonstrated, your story should have a really strict path that it's following. That you don't want too many side paths, and because you lose the train of thought and the heart of the story. But sometimes those things that you prune off, you really like.
You really like them.
And he said, save them, because if you're on most TV or radio shows, the most they want is a two-minute story. 3 minutes is endless on like a news show, talking about upcoming events. So that's been helping me with my pruning. I go,
Oh, wow.
it's not that I don't like you. It's just that you're not really part of this story, but you'll probably be your own story sometime
You'll be your own
later.
story, that's
Yes,
right.
Yes. yes.
And we can do that with personal stories too.
Right.
That we start talking about our families, we can always put Aunt Mary into a separate story.
Right.
I like the idea of pruning, because that's where the new growth comes. That's a nice way of describing
Nice.
it. Yeah. Now, where do you collect your stories? I mean, now that you're out from behind the card catalog, I mean, where are you? Where are you picking up stories like?
Well, I go to the libraries
still
all
go
the
to
time,
libraries,
yes, and crawl around on the floor and look for stories, and I do have a group of friends who are always keeping their eyes out. Several of them being librarians. One who's moved out of the district and lives in Florida, and one in Johnstown, and they'll send me, not necessarily the story, but they'll send me the reference to it and say, this is a story you might be able to
So you have
read.
scouts.
Yeah,
Story
scouts.
scouts. Story
Story
scouts.
Scout, yes.
How about personal stories? Do you do personal stories?
I've only done personal stories at one time for Riverway, and that was at a senior citizens meeting or organization. I don't do very many personal stories, but after doing these, I did 2 personal stories. And it took me a while to work them up to feeling really comfortable in telling them, not like they were almost like they were a story that was almost, say, out there.
Right.
Almost like a published story, And they were one was a story of my mother, who was a very, very she kept our family together in many, many ways. And living through the Depression and a sad childhood that she had, I often marveled at what a wonderful mother she was. And as an adult, I marveled, as a kid, I didn't. And one was on my father, who had an interest in refinishing furniture as a hobby. And this was the bathtub story that I tried to tell, Kate, many years ago when we were at the Glenn Sanders and I can't think of the gentleman's name, and he was asking us to think about something, an incident. And this was the bathtub story, and I didn't do much to it at that time. But when I came to getting ready for Riverway, I thought, that bathtub story has a lot of potential. So I worked very hard on that story. Then I took the 2 stories to Marnie Gillard and said, listen to them. And she did, and she gave me good feedback, and so I was comfortable going forth with them. And so I think perhaps I will try more personal stories.
Oh, good. Well, good.
But it's not something I do a lot. I really do more folk tales.
Yeah.
Yeah. Personal stories, there's how much do you want to expose your life
That's
to
true.
the general public? is one part of it, and making sure that while it's your story, it will resonate with your listeners, so that it will be, something they want to listen to. So they're not the easiest stories to tell.
No, that's true.
A folk tale, you can find many versions in books, and you kind of say, well, I like that part, and I like that part, and you kind of line them all up, and there you go. But the personal stories, you've got to figure out the beginning and the end. And
well, as I was saying with the bathtub story, I say it's about my father, but my father used to go to flea markets and auctions and buy old furniture and restore them. And once he came home, and his brother had this big truck, and he came home with a claw-footed bathtub, and he put it in the yard for us to swim in, because this was a long time ago, and we thought it was the greatest thing in the whole world. And until the polio epidemic went around, and then the pools were closed, and we had to drain that bathtub. But it was great to splash in, because you use a garden hose, fill it up as high as you want, slide down the back of them, because they were pretty good size, those old tubs. The water would splash all over, and
no one yelled at you.
Nobody yelled at us,
Grass got green,
Yeah, everything right. It was great, and my husband still laughs at me when I tell him we had a bathtub in our backyard.
Not the only bathtub.
Not the only bathtub, no.
Well, but getting the general from a personal story, the generalized is important, and then the connections. I think some of the things like sometimes in visiting a person in the hospital, you'll ask about a favorite time, and generally Thanksgiving and Christmas come up as family stories, and that's a good place to start with family stories, because people generally have shared the holiday. And then there's Joe Peck's story about the time the turkey hit the ceiling in the dining room. That's another whole story. Maybe we just ought to touch base on what's going to happen, and then we'll come back and have another story.
Sounds good, Joe.
What's going to happen over the summer? There's storytelling going on. We will be starting up at the Glenn Sanders Mansion again in September with Story Sundays and at Proctor's. So we'll be letting you know what those programs are, and please check our website for any information you want on storytelling. And what's the website again?
StoryCircle@proctors.org.
And that's A-T, Proctors.
Yes.
Okay. So if you want to know more about storytelling, that's the place to check. And what's happening?
Well, a little west of here in Clinton, New York, on Saturday, I think it's Saturday, June 9th, it's on the weekend, the Village Storytelling Festival will be happening, running 12 hours, 10 a.m. to 10 p.m., with a whole... What do storytellers come in? Herds?
Herds.
Gaggles?
Gaggle. I think gaggle like geese. A gaggle of storytellers.
Marnie Gillard, that Peggy just mentioned, from here, and Joe and Jesse Bruchak, who are in Saratoga, who have been on this show also. Becky Holder, whom you also mentioned.
Becky's in that
and then others. Beauty and the Beast storytellers. They're husband and wife who never tell which one is Beauty and which one is the Beast. They're from Ithaca. So we list the website on the slide you're looking at, villagestorytellingfestival.org. And
one of the nice things about that festival is that it's free. It's a mission of the churches in Clinton and the Chamber of Commerce, and Clinton is also the home of Hamilton College. So there's a lot of things come together for a really wonderful time, and I will go for the first time this year. It's a relatively new program, but I think it's going to be one that we would hope would be emulated in many other towns in upstate New York, because that particular town has some great stories in it, and it attracts other stories. Kind of like a good story, it's like honey, it attracts other stories. Like what? That's it.
Okay. And that's what I have for June. July, you have two things.
I have two things. On the 12th, I think it is.
Canal Days?
Canal Days.
14th.
The 14th. That Saturday and that Sunday is Canal Days along the Mohawk corridor, the Heritage Corridor, and there will be events. Please check the newspaper in many places. And I'm telling stories late morning and early afternoon at the Schoharie Crossings Historic Site, which also has another series of storytelling that'll come up in late August or late July and August. And that's also free, and they'll have pony rides and all sorts of things going on, and also exhibits on the history of the Erie Canal and other kinds of things. So that's on the 14th. The next weekend, on the Saturday, we're telling as part of the Schoharie River Days, and that's at the Schoharie River Center, which is a wonderful program that provides experiences for high school and junior high kids to really learn more about the environment, and they test waters in about 50 locations for the State Department of Environmental Conservation, among other things. And it's going to be in Burtonsville, which is a recovered community in the Schoharie Valley. And if you haven't been to Burtonsville, it's just off of Route 30 between the Mohawk River and Cobleskill. And it's a great little spot. It's a fun time. So I hope you turn out to that. And
Okay, and as you mentioned, at Schoharie Crossing, they are having, I believe it's their 20th, Not Just for Kids storytelling series. On Sundays at 6 p.m., 6 Sundays starting on July 29th, with the story crafters Jerry Burns and Barry Marshall from Philmont, New York, which is nearish Hudson.
Yeah,
It's sort of near Hudson, New York. And then Willie Claflin, who came to Riverway, I think 2 years ago, with Maynard the Moose.
Maynard the Moose.
And then one of my friends, who is actually staying with me tonight because she's here for school residency, Motoko.
Oh, Motoko.
A storyteller from Japan, but she's been in this country since she came to UMass as an exchange student. Concubines, Pickpockets, and Ghosts.
That's her title?
Yes. The Hidden Face of Japan.
And it's not just for kids, this storytelling,
Yes.
is it? Okay, okay.
Oh, yeah. She has wonderful traditional stories and personal stories. We were together this past weekend in Massachusetts for a storytelling weekend, working with Elizabeth Ellis. Oh. And she told her first telling of this story about how Christmas is celebrated in Japan. Wow. When she was a little girl and her family were Buddhists, they still had a Christmas tree, and they each got a present.
Wonderful.
And she started by singing Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer in Japanese. And so I'm going, gee, I know the tune, but the word, what is this song? Absolutely wonderful teller. Bill Lepp is on August 19th. He's known for his tall tales. He's won many liars contests. Andy Davis from New Hampshire will be here, and then our own Claire Nolan.
Claire Nolan.
Will end the series on September 9th, Tall Tales and True in the Mohawk Valley. Again, free admission. Donations are accepted. They're free refreshments, rain or shine.
And I must make another plug, because all those storytellers are wonderful. Motoko I'm a fan. I'm a real fan. And I'm a fan because she also combines some wonderful motion and mime. And it's a real wonder sometimes. It's downright mystical. And telling at Schoharie Crossing is fun because you're on the lawn of one of their visitor center is an old clapboard mid-18th century home, and you're right along the creek, and they have lemonade and good cakes, and it's just a nice break. Good drive.
Sometimes when the weather's a little iffy, they hold it in the building in back, the historic building in back that has some name that I can't remember, but and you'll see where the cars are.
And it's pretty much recovered from the flood, I understand.
Right, it's reopened a couple weeks ago. The parking lot the new parking lot isn't paved yet, but should be by July.
They had archaeological flooding.
Yes, the good news from the flooding in Fort Hunter is it ruined their parking lot and uncovered some archaeological.
Well, it's in
yeah.
Fort Hunter, the little village of Fort Hunter, and they actually uncovered the original Fort Hunter,
Right.
which was, they were curious in terms of really, they didn't have a good location for it, but when the macadam got taken off the parking lot, there it was,
Right.
laid out there just like somebody had taken a archaeological shovel to the place.
Yes, so that's one of the few good things that happened from the flooding in the Schoharie Valley.
Well, I have, go ahead.
And if you'd like more stories before our show comes on the next time, you can go to storycircle@proctors.org and click on YouTube. And we have over 60 stories that we've taken from our previous shows and a few other places. And we've gone over the 10,000 mark.
Wow.
Over 10,000 stories have been watched.
Oh, nice.
So
Please pass that email or that website around, because sometimes the question comes up, well, what is storytelling anyway? And that website is as good an answer to the question as you're going to find.
in fact, Elizabeth Ellis, who is a storyteller from Dallas, one of the national storytellers, and will be teaching storytelling at East Tennessee State University this summer.
Oh, really?
She is teaching personal storytelling, and she was very happy to see this, to give her students other examples of different people telling their own stories. Everybody has their own stories and they tell them their own way. Motoko, as Joe mentioned, is trained as a mime, so she has exquisite gestures. Other personal storytellers might just, I don't know how they talk without using their hands. I find it very difficult to do that, but anyways. So there's that, and always, as an arts organization, our ticket prices do not cover our expenses. So if you would care to become a patron of Story Circle at Proctor's, here's the website, storycircle@proctors.org, how you can help, and we appreciate all your help. GE matches any donations, by the way.
GE does
Because
match?
and anything that we're under Proctor's umbrella. So so you make the checks out to Proctor's and indicate that it's for Story Circle at Proctor's. And any matching funds we very gratefully receive.
And two particular ideas or questions you may have. What do we do with the money? What do we do with the money is we really use it to directly fund storytellers. Often when you're making a production, ticket prices don't bring in enough to really provide a reasonable honorarium to a teller. So we are provided with some flexibility in honoring the storyteller at various functions at Proctor's. And the other thing that we always do is we have a big celebration, kind of a celebration of storytelling, and members of the Guild tell for free, and the profit off of that show goes to fund grants in various locales within our community. So it spreads the idea of storytelling, and we've pretty much almost up to 100 programs over the life of our celebration. Maybe, give or take.
Yeah,
Okay.
we're approaching 90.
Well, that's almost 100 a month. I used to be an accountant. And I have to do one little bit, then we're going to come back to Peggy. I'm just going to do this one little thing. Now, what's different about this nose than my other noses?
It's a little darker.
It's a little darker. And this is a maroon nose.
Ah.
And you out there may be aware that I do red noses because you can't take yourself too seriously with a red nose. And my 45th reunion from Colgate University is coming up the first weekend in June. And I have ordered 600 of these maroon noses. And they have a parade, and it starts on campus and it goes to downtown Hamilton. And I am going to nose the entire parade.
Have you contacted Guinness?
I don't even. It's just a trivia. I'm doing it for the experience of nosing my classmates and generations of graduates of my alma mater.
So this is a nose mob.
This is a nose mob, yes. And I'll bring in photos, and I'm sure there'll be a story about it. But it was kind of a coming attraction, but I didn't know how to really build up to it, so I just thought
You just stuck your nose
I
in
just
right
stuck
now.
my nose right in right now, and now, so with that, without further experience, I like that word, I'll just park that nose. And maybe we could go back and ask Peggy to
Yes.
bring us around to a real story.
Yes, another.
We don't want any faux stories, we want a real
A
story.
real story. This story is called The Horse Doctor. And I had to take out my note. I took it from a book called Storytelling for Young Adults that someone had sent me, a friend, one of my colleagues. And I love this story. I love horses too. There was once an old woman who lived in a little cottage all by herself out in the country. She had a small kitchen garden, a few hens, a cow, and an old horse. Oh, but how she loved that horse. She would sing to the horse. She would talk to the horse. She would put her arm around the horse's neck, put her face up next to him, and tell him all her troubles. And even though he couldn't reply, she was sure he understood, and she found comfort in telling him her secrets. Well, it just so happened that one day she noticed that the horse had stopped eating, and he wasn't galloping around the pasture, and he spent the day with his head hung down. And she was so worried, she called the veterinarian, and he came to examine the horse. And when he was finished examining the horse, he said to the old woman, "I can find nothing wrong with the horse that I can help him with, but you know, this horse is very, very old." And he went on his way. Well, the horse continued to fail. And one day the woman remembered there was a new minister at church, and he had told the congregation that he would help anyone, anywhere, anytime, with any problem they had. So she went to the minister. Now, the minister was a very young man, and he said to the old woman, "I don't know an awful lot about animals, especially farm animals. I grew up in the city, and all we ever had was a cat." But he saw how distraught the woman was, and he went to see the horse. He opened the horse's mouth and looked inside and went, Then he put his hand on the horse's forehead and went, He walked very slowly around the horse, touching it very gently on its flanks. And then he took the horse's face in his hands and he said, "You poor creature, you sure are sick. Well, if you live, you live. If you die, you die." And he went on his way. Well, it seemed like overnight. The horse was galloping around the pasture, eating again. The woman was delighted. Could the minister have performed a miracle, she wondered? Days went by, and word spread that the minister was very sick. He had an abscess in his throat that was growing bigger and bigger, and it was cutting off his breathing, and the doctors didn't seem to be able to do anything for him. So the old woman went to pay him a visit. She went into his study, and there he sat in a chair with a blanket around his shoulders and his mouth open and his tongue kind of hanging out. And the old woman looked at his mouth and she went, She felt his forehead and she said, She walked carefully around him, touching him very gently on the shoulders. She took the minister's face in her hands and she said, "You poor man, you sure are sick. Well, if you live, you live. If you die, you die." And the minister, remembering those were the exact words he had said to her horse, he burst out laughing. The abscess in his throat broke, and all the poison drained away. And in days to come, the minister was well. Well, the minister never claimed to be a veterinarian, and the woman never claimed to be a doctor, but they had helped each other, and they became the best of friends for many, many years to come. And that's the horse doctor.
Wow! Wow! A story of a miracle. Really?
Don't know.
Well, why not? Why not? I mean, now, and again, I didn't know where that one was going. I mean, that was a bit of a surprise ending because, and again, you didn't end the story really. You just said it continued, and I liked the hand motion.
Continued.
Yeah,
That was their best friends.
Yeah,
Yes.
that was wonderful. That's wonderful. Now, what was the source of that?
It was from a book called Storytelling for Young Adults, and it was edited by Gail DeVos.
Those. Okay.
DEVOS?
DEVOS, DeVos. And there were techniques in the book for young adults to tell stories. There were no little children stories for little children in the book. They were more for young adults to tell.
Good.
No,
Well, that was fun.
the horse doctor.
The horse doctor.
So both of those stories were rather heartfelt, and none of your scary stories.
Yeah, you know.
Doesn't she look
actually,
like a really nice lady?
She started out, the other one
the
started out,
trouble
the trouble one
yeah, I
started
thought
out
that-
really,
yeah.
I thought that was going to be a good, scary, ghosty story.
Yeah.
But then the trouble wound up in the hole, you know? I mean, because, we did prep ourselves just a little bit and say, now, what do you think Peggy's going to tell? And we said, oh, we're sure she tells a ghost story.
or one of
No,
your.
I didn't prepare.
Yes. No, that's okay.
That's okay. It's good to have something else to come tell us the next time you're on the show.
Yes.
Yes. We can deal with that. We can deal with that.
Yes.
Deal with that. And when you think back to the first guild meeting, whenever that was, and to the people that have influenced you, is there kind of something that's been a constant for you over that time? Are there things that you've seen that's changed in terms of how you may view story or storytelling?
Things that have changed or stayed the same. Well, many of the storytellers who used to come to the meetings, Becky Holder has moved away. I don't know how Lois is. I don't even know if she was at Telebration this year. Tom Weekly
Has retired.
has retired from storytelling. So a lot of those people have,
That's true.
and
That's-
then we have new people who, are telling, and some wonderful storytellers. I haven't been to the last few story circle meetings, but I know from Telebration, some of the, tellers are just so exciting and to hear. So it always is wonderful to see that cycle of new people coming into the storytelling circle.
Thank you for that, because there are various levels of performance that are things that we do at Proctor's and at Story Sundays and Telebration. But the other thing that our guild does is that we do meet monthly, and I always get confused on the third
Tuesday of the odd months.
So that would be like May's meeting was here last week.
Right.
Yes.
Because May is the 5th month.
Right. And then on the even months, like June coming up, it's at
Pine Hills
Pine
Branch.
Hills Branch Library in Albany.
Right, near Steamer 10 Theater.
And near,
In fact, just across the street from Steamer.
and it's also across the street from Mahar's.
Joe has yet to write his touring the greater Albany area, bar to bar.
Pub to pub, pub to pub.
Would that be a personal story?
That'll be a personal story. And a designated driver, I must say. Yes. And the format of those really is a general roundtable of kind of settling in together, and then tellers bring material to get feedback on and to try out. And so if you have any thoughts on kind of tasting storytelling live, we really would invite you and encourage you to come to one of the guild meetings. You don't have to be a member. Membership actually costs you $5 a year.
No, it's up to
10.
It's up to 10.
It's up to 10. Oh, well, we doubled, but it's still pretty reasonable, and that covers the mailing cost of the newsletter, basically. At any rate,
And
come out.
a subsidized workshop a year.
That's right. We do provide a workshop for the members out of
with
that. Yeah.
usually a teller, a national teller that's traveling through.
Right.
Michael Parent did one for us in April when he was here for Riverwind.
Right. So that's the benefits of membership. Go ahead.
I think also it gives us young tellers, or new tellers, let me say, a venue where they can tell their story without feeling it has to be perfect, you know, and they can get feedback, you know, on it without being criticized,
Right.
and so that they come away encouraged,
Right.
you know, with their stories.
And the feedback process is the teller is in charge. Some people say, I got tired of telling it to my toaster and my dog, so I want to tell it to some real faces. But that's all, you know, it's too new for me to hear anything. And most people will accept accolades, you know, I liked this, I liked this, I liked this. And then some people it's not they haven't just birthed it. They've worked on it. It's seasoned somewhat, and they are interested in. It doesn't even have to be a suggestion. It could just be, I got confused who was talking here, or the ending didn't really satisfy me, or sometimes offering a suggestion is, since you've only heard it once, is it won't be dead on. So, anyways, but we always try to be very kind. That these are new things. We understand. They're still growing.
Very nurturing group. It's very nurturing.
And it's in our aim is really to nurture the art of storytelling and storytellers here in the Capital District. So attendance at the Guild meeting is a great first step if you're at all interested.
Okay, so you can go to storycircle@proctors.org and click on Story Circle, or Story Circle. These two websites are kind of interwoven. Go to story-circle.org, and you can directly click on meetings there.
Yeah.
Do they give directions
Yes.
to the Albany?
Yeah.
Yes.
I have not been to the Albany.
Yes, it's very nice, and it has its own parking lot.
Yeah.
Not all the branches libraries do have their own parking lots, but I always like knowing I'm going to be able to dump my car somewhere rather than cruising around and can I fit into that spot and all that. Yeah.
Is there a process that they use to choose where the Story Circle is going to be meeting? Because over the years, it has moved.
It has floated. A process. It was, I think the Scotia Library was closing early, and so we moved from there. That may have been when we came to Colonie Town Library.
I think that
and
was.
then Guilderland's, their room, we used to be in Guilderland on the even months, but their rooms, you could only reserve them like 2 months in advance, and Claire Nolan couldn't get a room more often than not.
They were very busy.
And whereas at Pine Hills, we could. So we've kind of the oldest established permanent floating Story Circle Guild in the Capital District.
We might want to revisit the Tuesday, Wednesday thing, because that was predicated on some folks that couldn't make a Tuesday or Wednesday night, as I remember it, so we kept
Yeah.
the
But I
rotation.
think that, I mean, you have problems with some Tuesday nights.
Tuesday
so
nights, too, it's true.
It's still, and Anne-Marie McLaughlin always is Irish dancing on
Right, that's right. She does that.
Tuesdays, I think it is. So we only have a chance of seeing her on a Wednesday. So we have 4 more minutes, guys. I just thought.
4 more minutes.
Did you come with a poem, Joe?
I have a poem, and I have some thoughts from. I signed up about a couple of months ago for the quote of the day from a fellow that lives in the state of Washington, and I get a theme. And today's quotes were from Sir Laurence Olivier. And he has a quote there about his life as an actor, which was quite extraordinary, but it makes a case about storytelling as an art form. And he says, some of my stage performances I now understand were the best expressions of art from outside myself. And some of my film performances I understand as some of the best performances from within myself. And when I read that, it speaks to this issue about storytelling and the live interaction between the audience and the performer, the audience and the teller. And whereas Olivier was doing Shakespeare, so it was lines that he learned rather than kind of recalled the way a storyteller would. There's an intimacy that you experience in storytelling in the theater that is palpable. And for Olivier, when he was in front of the camera, he felt it was much more of an internal issue for him to express the character, to exude the plot. And the quote just struck me as an explanation of some of the differences, because that's another thing about storytelling. You know, people say, well, it's like theater. Well, you know, theater has that light
Fourth wall.
The fourth wall. And when you're telling at this table or in the Proctor's Theater or places where the lights are up, the level of connection is so much greater.
Right.
And it shapes the message, it shapes the performance, it shapes the meaning, it builds the emotion.
Yeah, I mean, I love the theater. My husband and I are subscribers at Capitol Rep, for instance. And every summer we spend a week up in Stratford, Ontario, where they have a theater festival. But in theater, the people on stage are pretending to be somebody else. The audience is pretty much pretending they're not there. And the actors are pretending the audience isn't there most often. And all the action happens on stage. But with storytelling, when you're looking at each other, and the storyteller isn't bound by the contract to say the words the playwright wrote. They don't have that with Shakespeare.
Right.
But with modern playwrights,
yes.
that is a contract. You will say every word I wrote and not another one.
No.
With storytellers, since you are the author of the story, unless you're doing a literary story, you have much more flexibility to, oh, you understand what I mean. Oh, you had a kid like that. Yeah, I can see. Yeah. There's a little improv. There's an intimacy,
Right.
acknowledging each other's breath.
That's true. that's pretty good closure. You know, the other line from Olivier is that we're all actors, we're all storytellers. Some of us are just sometimes better than others, and we've had a really great storyteller with us. We've had Peggy Cimino, and we're thankful for your coming, and we hope that you're blessed by telling stories to people who are really going to experience it well.
Thank you very much for coming,
Thank
and
you.
we hope you come back next month.
It goes all my life's a circle, sunrise and sundown. The moon rolls through the nighttime till the daybreak comes around. And all my life's a circle, but I can't tell you why. seasoned spinning